Older people of Reddit, what was the equivalent of teaching your grandparents to use the internet when you were growing up? My grandmother, born 1888, never learned to drive and always referred to my grandfather's car as the machine. When my great-grandmother first had electricity and installed in her house, she was given an electric clothes iron. After ironing, she would insist on leaving it plugged in and placed on a high shelf so the leftover electricity would drain back out. Apparently it took a long time to convince her that electricity did not work like water. This reminded me that my grandma, who was in her 90s and had email, thought that the email was delivered to her inbox by people. My mom would tell her she sent her something and my grandma would say, well, they probably haven't delivered it yet, when most likely it was in spam. So cute, I miss her. She's also the one that told me in her 80s that she still feels the same as she did when she was 18. She meant in her head, not physically. She's right, you do feel the same. VCRs. They were all slightly different and getting them to record TV programs at specific times was somehow guaranteed to fail. And if it went awry you could be pretty sure that episode of The X-Files or whatever would not be broadcast again for a year or two. Here's a really old one. My dad, who would be 102 if he were still alive, grew up on a farm. When his dad got their first tractor he couldn't figure out the manual shifter, so he would make my dad sit on his knee and shift gears for him while he drove. Family legend has it that my farmer granddad, still with us, in his 90s now, tried to stop his first tractor by shouting, "Whoa," at it, like he would with his draft horse. The tractor, obviously, ignored him entirely, and Granddad and the machine ended up in the canal. A record player. They have 3 speeds, 33 revolutions per minute for LPs, 45 revolutions per minute for singles and 78 revolutions per minute for the old-timey records. My grandparents had theirs set to 33. I was messing around with it and left it at 45. They called my parents ranting that I'd broken it. I told them how to fix by just moving the control that highly visible at the front. The next time I visited they accused me again of breaking it. I had to change the setting and was told never to touch it again. The irony was completely lost on them. According to my nan, it was teaching my great-great-grandmother how to use a toaster that you don't need to turn the bread in. My dad tried to turn my CDs over like records in the early 90s. One of my uncles used to rewind both sides of music cassettes after listening to them. Taping the bit of cardboard over the remote so that only the power, channel, and volume buttons are showing. A little off topic, my high school got computers my senior year. Admin hunted for a teacher who had a free period so they could teach computer class. One of my favorite school memories is the football coach standing at the front of the room offering extra credit to whoever could figure out how to turn the computer on. My mom, a genealogist, was 50 when she got her first computer. I was her tech support for the next 32 years, most of it was remote. Trying to explain how to use email was sheer torture, but who picks up all these messages and delivers them? My brother bought her a cell phone but didn't bother to program it for her, so she mailed it to me to fix it. Eventually I printed, laminated and taped her password and all the phone numbers to the back of her phone. We mailed that phone back and forth for a month before she felt comfortable using it. God, I miss her. Debit cards. Like, how to actually pay by card and withdraw at an ATM. Lol. When my mother passed away in June 2018, I realized my dad had no idea how to use his debit cards because my mother handled everything like that. We had to go to an ATM to actually practice taking cash out, and then go into a shop to practice using the card to pay for things. He was totally blown away and after using contactless to pay for some newspapers exclaimed, "My God. It's so easy." The shopkeeper could barely conceal her laugh. My father, born 1922, told me his grandfather refused to believe in radios, he figured someone was pulling his leg. My grandma was born in 1925. She once told me that her 4th grade teacher told the class that in the future you'd be able to talk to a person across long distances while seeing them at the same time. My grandma vividly remembers thinking that it was the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. We speak through FaceTime regularly now. My lovely grandma used her microwave for one thing only, heating water. It was adorable. She also only used email once. Her message to me: "Your dad made me do this. I'll never be the same again. Love, Grandma." When I was around 12, my parents got my grandparents a cassette player. This was not new technology by any means, but my nana and granddad had only ever listened to the radio or records, so it was new to them. My parents gave them some tapes to listen to. I think I may even have made them a mixtape of some of their old favorites, but when they first plugged the cassette player in, my grandparents just turned it on, pressed play, with no tape inside, and watched the little wheels turn. It was like magic to them, they were so delighted by the whole thing. My great-grandmother was born in 1900. She was in her late 90s when this happened. One day while visiting her in the nursing home, my mom asked me to call home to remind my dad to put dinner in the oven. My great-grandmother saw me use my brick of a cell phone and wanted to know what it was. I explained and her face just lit up. "So you could be grocery shopping and call home to ask your husband what he wants for dinner?" she asked. She thought this was just fantastic. Then she asked if she could try. She called my great-aunt, her daughter, on my cell and regaled her about the marvels of modern technology. It was so cute. Great-grandma was a month away from her 102nd birthday when she died. She lived long enough to cuddle my son, her first great-great-grandchild. She was a cool lady. I miss her. My grandma is 86 and although she had a cell phone since the early 2000s, she never really used it and always used the landline. Last year, her old cell phone died and we got her an iPhone thinking that it'll likely stay the drawer. Imagine our surprise when we started receiving group iMessages from her with photos of her garden. She figured out how to do that all on her own, even the speech-to-text function. She has Parkinson's and it really helps. So I showed her FaceTime and she was over the moon. Now it's video calls all the time. I never thought she would get to grips with that thing, but sure as hell am I glad she did. Teaching my parents how to hook up the Atari to the TV. My dad could hook up a VCR and use it, my mom couldn't, but neither could do the Atari. Plus, I was also small enough to fit behind the TV without them needing move anything. Wait. I'm 27 but my mom's favorite story about technology from her time was trying to introduce her grandmother to TVs. She had refused to buy one since the day they came out because she didn't understand them and it scared her. When she got too old to live on her own, she had to move in with her daughter and granddaughters, my grandparents and aunt's house, and it was the 1970s so they obviously had TVs. She was basically immobile and sat in her favorite chair all day in a slip, nightgown kind of dress. They had to turn her chair around if they wanted to watch TV and she wasn't decent for company because she was 100% convinced that the people could see her. She thought that as they were watching the Brady Bunch on TV, they were doing the same thing but watching my mom's family. She was Irish Catholic so modesty was a huge deal for her and she'd complain the whole time the TV was on about how uncouth it is for the young men and husbands in these TV shows to be watching ladies wearing bed clothes in their own homes. The only way she would watch TV with everyone was if someone helped her into a Sunday dress and did her hair and makeup. And then she'd sit there poised in the chair like she was on a talk show smiling and occasionally waving at the people on TV. The microwave. There was a while there old people thought it was a high-tech magic box that if you pressed the wrong buttons could alter space-time forever and blow up the universe. My grandfather had issues with the money machine. He used to get his children to go with him to withdraw cash because those damn holes in the wall. Not those holes in the wall, Reddit. Okay mom, one more time. Turn on the TV, turn on the VCR. Press input on the remote. Put the tape in the machine and press play. I grew up in the 80s, that makes me older, probably. Anything that had a remote control was a lot for them. If they couldn't walk over and turn a knob or press a tactile button it was confusing for them. There's an old picture I've seen online where someone has covered all of the buttons on the remote with tape except power, volume, and channel. That's real, I've done it. I think the transition is that I 60ish have noticed is that I expect technology to change. I expect an iPhone with new features. I am bummed about the lack of jetpacks, but otherwise technology keeps delivering wonder. But without a manual so you have to figure each device out. My parents didn't expect the changes. They had trouble adapting. The pace of change has accelerated. 3 of my grandparents were born before the first airplane flight and 3 of them watched men walk on the moon. I see a new car feature and moan about its imperfections. Convincing a grandparent that he was not going to be able to replace his manual shift car with a newer car that was going to have the shift lever on the steering column like he was used to. Edit. Some of the comments indicate people are confused. I am not talking about the automatic transmission lever on the steering column. That was there because the manual shift was on the column before automatic transmissions were a thing. Standard H pattern manual stick shift but located on the steering column, not on the floor. You need to step on the clutch with your left foot to shift the gears. It was called 3 on the tree. Hey office person over 50, that tray that slides out of your PC when you push the button, yeah that there with the big round hole in it, get your ***KIN coffee cup out of it. For the third time. How am I supposed to explain things to the purchasing folks? Again? People actually put drinks in the DVD drive? The thought process of that is baffling. It wasn't super common, but it wasn't super rare either. My coffee cup holder is broken was an infamous help desk meme before memes were a thing. God damn credit cards. My granddad was a very clever man, God rest his soul. Was in the RAF during the war, flew in Lancasters. I hold him in such high regard. A legend. But the concept of what a credit card actually was, he had no clue. Completely lost on him. Tens of thousands of pounds debt. He kept receiving letters through the post saying he was eligible for X amount of money, so he signed up and spent it. He genuinely thought it was free money. I can remember the look of helplessness on my dad's face once he realized what had happened to the old man. Even when trying to explain how credit cards work, the old man just didn't get it. This all happened back in the 90s. I feel guilty for taking those £5 notes he slipped me to spend on sweets. But I am also pissed at my parents and aunties and uncles for not realizing sooner. A bitter lesson I learned at a young age. I now personally keep an eye on my family and friends and make sure they are living within their means. I would hate for someone close to me to go through that. Utter BS. I grew up in the 50s and 60s and, although this is a great question, I honestly can't think of an analogous situation. Things were so much simpler before computers entered the scene and the sense was always more of older people teaching younger.